but I won't be here, so I'll leave a recording. You can learn it whenever you're available. Good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Kesubos, Daf Samach Vav Amud Beis, and as well Daf Samach Zayin. And we're starting at the bottom of Samach Vav Amud Aleph with a new Mishnah. It was commonplace for the father of the bride to give a dowry, to give some money toward the young couple. And we know from the Nichsei Malug, or the Nichsei Tzon Barzel, to be more accurate, that when a woman would bring a dowry into a marriage, she was able to get it back. The principal, she was able to get it back at the end of the marriage. So therefore, it had to be coded into the Kesuba in that way. So our Mishnah here delineates a number of different iterations of what the dowry could look like and how it should be recorded in the Kesuba accordingly, so that she could then get her money back when the marriage concludes. The Mishnah at the bottom of Samach Vav Amud Aleph opens and reads as follows: Haposek mos lechosno umeis chosno. Let's say that a father-in-law, the father of the bride, said he wants to give money to his son-in-law, and then unfortunately, before he could get married, the husband died. So let's say we're talking about Rachel and Reuven. So Rachel's father said, here's $10,000 for the happy couple. But before the marriage could be finalized, Reuven died. And Reuven died without children. And Reuven had a brother named Shimon. So therefore, we have a case of Yibum here. So then what happens with the dowry money that the father of the bride, Rachel's father, wanted to put into the Kesuba? Says the Gemara, Amru Chachamim, the Chachamim teach us, Yochel Hu, the father is allowed to say, Sheyomar, he can say, La'achicha hisi rotze litein, I didn't want to give the money to you, I wanted to give the money to Reuven, but Reuven died. V'loch ifshi litein, but you I'm not interested in giving. In other words, the father of the bride is not obligated to continue with this dowry with a new husband. It could just be that he only intended on giving the money to Reuven if Rachel were to have married Reuven, but because Reuven died and Shimon is alive, so the father of the bride is not obligated to continue and follow through. Let's say in a less dramatic case, Pascha lehachnis lo 1,000 dinar, she wants to bring 1,000 dinar into the marriage. So then huposek kenegdan, what does he write in the Kesuba? He writes chamesh esrei mana. So that's it's elef is 1,000 dinar and chamesh esrei mana is 1,500. So he has to give an uptick of 50%. Cash is king. It was understood. Listen, now the interest rates they're growing and still terrible, right? So they're still very bad. Back in the day, the interest rates were pretty good apparently. And if you were given $1,000 at the time of a chuppah, at the time of the Kesuba, you would write into the Kesuba that for sure that money would be worth at least 50% more when the time comes at the end of the marriage. Uchaneged hashum, let's say she gives something, but the item has been evaluated. Hu posek pachos chomesh, then he has to give, he has to put in the Kesuba a lesser volume of money. Yes, she brought in a $1,000 television, but we lower it by a couple $100 because we know that will depreciate over the course of time. We have this in our taxes. How much has this device depreciated over the course of time? Fine. And then shum b'mana v'shava b'mana. Let's say she gives something as a dowry, and it was a mana, and it was in fact evaluated as a mana. So then it goes in the Kesuba as a mana. Then ein lo ala mana. Then you don't give a reduced value for the depreciation of a device if it's already been evaluated. Shum b'mana. Let's say that there was something that needed to be assessed, and we thought it was about a mana, but he didn't have this item yet given in the marriage. So then he no senes shloshim echad sela v'dinar. Rashi and the Meforshim here explain why this number is ever so specific. It's basically that ratio of reduction. We said that we're supposed to reduce it by a fifth. This is that reduction of a fifth. Had it been that there were 400, senes chamesh meos, then it would have to be that the math was offset, because we're always offsetting. Cash will always have an increase of 50% or a third mila gav, or it will be a third. It'll be a fifth from a fifth reduction if she is going to bring into the marriage something that needs to be evaluated. At the very bottom line, last word on Samach Vav Amud Aleph, the Mishnah continues, Ma shechasan posek hu posek pachos chomesh, seemingly saying the same idea repeatedly. And what the Mishnah here is saying on the top of Samach Vav Amud Beis is that whatever a chassan is going to put in the Kesuba from that which is an evaluated item, he's always going to reduce it by 1/5. The Gemara returns to the very, very beginning of our Mishnah and asks the following question: hey, what's going on with this Ruvain and Shimon brothers. We know Ruvain died and left Rachel in the lurch, and she's supposed to marry Shimon, all well and good. And the father of the bride said, I didn't want to give the money to Shimon. I only wanted to give the money to Ruvain. So the Gemara wants to know, well, what if one was a Talmud Chacham and the other was an Am Haaretz? That's what this brisa is dealing with. 2 lines down on Samach Vav Amud Beis. Obviously, if the first one, if Reuven was a Talmud Chacham and the second one was an Am Haaretz, there, for sure, the father of the bride has every right to say, I don't want my dowry to go to Shimon, he's an Am Haaretz. But even, says the brisa, Ela afilu rishon Am Haaretz, even if the first boy, if Reuven was an Am Haaretz, v'sheni Talmud Chacham, even if the Yavam, who she is potentially going to marry, he's a Talmud Chacham, still the father has every latitude. It's his money. Yachalomar, he's allowed to say to Shimon, I didn't want to give the money to you. I didn't want you to be my son-in-law. I wanted him to be my son-in-law. I have no desire to give it to you. No problem at all. In other words, we don't care what the status might be of brother 1 and brother 2 of Ruvain and Shimon. When Ruvain dies and now brother number 2 is in the picture as a Yavam, we don't care. The father of the bride always maintains the right to say, I don't want to give you this money. Pascha lahachnis lo elav dinar. We said a couple of cases that were identical to one another in regards to the math. Hainu Reisha. The Gemara says, Tana Shuma Rabba, Tana Shuma Zuta. We needed to have multiple cases to make sure that we knew that there was an item that may have a large shuma, a large evaluation, and an item that may be a small evaluation. And as well, Tana Shuma Didei and the Katani Shuma Dida as well. We need evaluations from her side and from his side. We need to make sure that we know that this math applies under all circumstances, that when a woman brings cash into a marriage, then he is going to increase in the ksuba 50% of that cash. And if it's going to be something that's an item and not cash, then it's reduced by a fifth. The Gemara, the new Mishnah on the top of Samach Vav Amud Beis, 10 lines down reads, Pascha lahachnis lo ksafim. If she's giving cash, so Sela, which is really 4 dinar, that's Nasa Shisha dinar. Same exact math we said before, 50% increase. Why do we keep repeating the same thing? The Gemara will ask that question. Hachasan mekabel alav asara dinar lekupa. This is a new din. The Chasan has to accept upon himself 10 dinarim for kupa. We'll see in the Gemara what a kupa is. The chol mana uman. It's basically 10% uptick. So for every mana that exists, he has to give 10% for kupa. We'll see in the Gemara what that means. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer hakol kiminag Medina. Lav davka that it's going to be 10% for kupa. It really just depends on the minhag of that locale. Says the Gemara, the first line of this Mishnah really belongs in the previous Mishnah. It's just indicating that when cash is inserted as part of the dowry, then when we write it up in the ksuba, we add 50%. Hainu posei kenegdam chamisha sarman. It's the same exact thing we had in the previous Mishnah when there was 1,000. We wrote in the ksuba 1,500. So here you say 4 sela, and we add 50% at 6. The math is the same. Why bring so many cases? Says the Gemara, Tana iska rabba, Tana iska zuta. We need to have transactions that are very large and transactions that are very small, because we might have thought differently about each of these transactions. Third of the way down, Samach Vav Amud Beis v'tzricha. We need both of these cases. Why? Di'itana iska rabba the nafish revacha. I might have thought that in a case where we're talking about larger numbers, the only time we would do that 50% uptick is when we're dealing with larger numbers. Avaliska zuta, the zuta revacha imalo. But in regards to smaller numbers, I might have thought that it's too painful to lose those couple of extra shekel, and we would therefore not reduce that money. Tzricha. Therefore, we need both of those cases. Had we only taught the case of a very small amount of money, like this new Mishnah on Samach Vav Amud Beis of only 4 sela, so then the zutar ziyuni, the risk is very low. Aval iska rabba, but the risk with larger dollars, the swing of dollars when you're in the stock market can be very wild, much more. It feels more volatile with large percentages, larger numbers, even though the percentages may be the same. So aval iska rabba the nafish ziyuna, where the risk is greater. I might have said, you know what, 50% is fine when you're dealing with 4 sela, but 50% is not fine when you're dealing with 1,000. A whole different ballgame. Kamash Malan says the Gemara Tzricha, we therefore need both cases. It doesn't matter. The percentages of increase are going to stay the same. We don't factor in risk as a reason to change the percentages. What was the case of Kupa in our Mishnah? At the 2 dots here, a little bit more than a third of the way down, the Gemara says Achasam Mekabel Alav Asara dinar lekupa. We said that a husband, according to the Tanakh, he says to give 10% of the money in the form of kupa. My kupa, says the Gemara, Amar Avashi, kupa shel besamim. Kupa is a reference to spices. And if you look in Rashi, Dibur Hamaschil lekupa, a third of the way down in the Rashis, and you go down a couple of lines into there, he'll see v'yiknu lo mehem b'samim lirchos behem b'tamruke hanoshim shekach she'er isha mevia l'bayla mona ru'uyel hi lebesamim shel asara zuz. Fine. So we see here that it's basically soaps and potions and all of the makeups and cleansing products that a wife would want. That's not a new thing. This has been going on for millennia. It's been going on since the world started. And this is something that is part and parcel of a ksuba. We understand that this is the case. Men have no such, we don't get soap. We don't get given these things at all. Women get it. And it's a requirement in the ksuba. And as well, says the Gemara as a qualification, it only applies in a case where there was a minhag for women to have these things, but in a place where women never got to use these special spices to smell so good, let's say in a community where no women wear perfume, so that's a problem, and therefore there's no requirement to put it into the ksuba. The Rambam in Hilchos Isurei Bia writes that even to smell a woman's perfume with intent to enjoy is Nisr D'Rabbanan. Fascinating. Doesn't take much because the olfactory, our smell is a very, very powerful trigger for many things. Okay, so one has to be careful. You can't control what enters your nose, but you have to be able to control what enters your brain. So the Rambam enumerates among other Isurei D'Rabbanan that one is not allowed to smell a woman's perfume with intent. The Gemara continues halfway down. Boy Ravashi, b'mana hanishom o b'mana hamiskabel. When our Mishnah says that for every mana he has to give 10%, which evaluation number are we talking about? Is it the entry number or is it the reduced by 20% number? That we don't know. Says the Gemara, Im Tim Salomar Mona Hamiskabel. If you want to say it's the reduced number, that's fine. Yom Rishon or Kol Yom V'Yom. Is it only the first day, that first day that they get married, or every day does he have to give 10% of that money? And Im Tim Salomar Kol Yom V'Yom. If it's every day of the week, Shabbos Rishon, is it only the first week? Or Kol Shabbos V'Shabbos. Does he have to give her the money for Kupa every week? And Im Tim Salomar Kol Shabbos V'Shabbos. If it's true for every week, Chodesh Rishon or Kol Chodesh V'Chodesh. Is it only true for 1 month, or is it true for every month? And if you want to say that she gets the kupa every day for whatever money there is that day, she always gets 10%. Shana Rishon, is it only true for her first year? Or Kol Shana V'Shana? We don't know the answer to this. The Gemara concludes with a teiku. Story time. The Gemara says 2/3 of the way down. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rab, Ma'aseh b'bito shel Nakdimon ben Gurion, shepasku lachachamim 400 zehuvim lekupa shel besamim lebo bayom. Wow. It's a wildly wealthy family. And the Gemara says that the daughter of Nakdimon ben Gurion, who was known to be a massively wealthy individual in Yerushalayim, so his daughter got 400 zuz for kupa in one day. Amra lahem, and she said to others, Kach tifsiku livnosechem, this should be the same allocation for your daughters, a bracha for wealth. Anu achareha amen. And then here they said amen. And if you remember a couple of days ago, or was it yesterday, people didn't say amen because we had said that her husband died. So why over here are we saying amen? And why 2 days ago were we not saying amen to the bracha of the daughter of Nakdimon ben Gurion? Take a look at the bottom Tosfos. The bottom Tosfos calls this out. Dibur hamasil vanu achareha amen. Lemala, just yesterday we learned this. Lo anu achareha. Why? Shelohaya bailachai. Because at that point, her husband had already died. So she said, look, if you're in need of collecting a ksuba, so then you should get as much as I. They're like, we don't want to say amen to that. Your husband died. But avalkan shehayachai, but here her husband was still alive, and she was just getting something that was a part of her ksuba, this money for the kupa. That the Gemara says, anu achareha amen. Right? Good distinction. All right, where are we? Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, 2/3 of the way down. Ma'aser Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. It's just a little bit later in time. Shahaya Rochev ala Chamor. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was riding a donkey. Vayotzem Yerushalayim. And he was out in the outskirts of Yerushalayim. Vayu Talmid of Mahalchan Acharav. And his students were in tow. Ra'a Riba Achas. They saw one woman. They saw a young woman. Shahaya Samalaketes Seorim. She was collecting barley. Liben Galale Behemton Shel Aravim. From among the fecal matter, from among the droppings of the animals that belong to Arabs. Kevan Shirasa also, once she saw him, she wrapped herself up to be very modest, and she stood in front of him. And Amra Lo, she said, Rebbe, Parnaseni. She said to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I'd like you to please give me some food. Amar Lo, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says to her, Biti, Mi'at, my daughter, who are you? Amar Lo, she says back to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Bas Nakdimon ben Gurion ani. I am the daughter of Nakdimon ben Gurion. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai knew Nakdimun ben Gurion. It's like not knowing the wealthiest family in town. Everybody knows who that family is. So then the Gemara says, Amar la, Biti, my daughter, Mamon shel beis avich, heichan halach. What happened to all of the riches and all of the wealth and all of the gold that your family had? Amar lo, the daughter says back to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rebbe, lo chedein maslin masla b'Yerushalayim. Don't they have the following mashal in Yerushalayim? Melach mamon chaser. What a great line. The Gemara says, I'll literally translate, which makes no sense, and then we'll learn it in context. To salt your money, you have to have a lacking. And if you take a look at Rashi, Rashi gives a beautiful explanation, 10 lines from the bottom, Dibur Hamaschil, Melach Mamon Chaser. Rashi explains, Harotze limloach mamono, somebody who wants to salt their money. Klomar, as if to say, ligrom lo sheyiskayim, in order to guarantee, that's how they used to salt meat. That's how they used to keep meat. They didn't have freezers. So what they would do is they would put salt on it and it would prevent it from getting bacteria and molding. So how do we do the same to our money? How do we prevent our money from becoming bad, really, from overspending? What? Salted, absolutely.
Every day.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the literal people, if someone's going to go home and like pour some iodized salt on their like wallet.
Kosher salt.
Only kosher salt.
Yeah. No, the iodized one.
So the Gemara says that here, what you need to do is chaser. You need to take a loss in order to keep your money. In other words, you have to give tzedakah. And the more tzedakah you give, up to a point, and we'll learn about that a little bit tonight, that's considered appropriate. And that's the right way to save money. Some say the way that you save your money is with chesed, by doing kindness. Anyways, the story continues. She said, what about your father-in-law? Usually families marry in similar financial tax brackets. So I'm sure your father-in-law has some money. The daughter says back to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, my father-in-law and my father went into business together. And when one business tanked, all the businesses tanked, and she lost all the money. And then she goes out on a limb and she says, Amrlo, she says to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rebbe, Zechora tok shechasamta al ksubasi. You were one of the people who signed my ksuba at my wedding. That's a chash of a ksuba. Would love to see that ksuba with the signature of Yochanan ben Zakkai. It'd be worth millions of dollars. What? That's incredible. That's incredible. So Amar lehen letalmidav. Then he spins around and talks to the talmidim who were following him. Zachor ani, I remember kshechasamti al ksubasa, when I signed on this ksuba of the daughter of Nakdimon ben Gurion, how much money was in it? Al ksubasa shalzu va'isi koreba elef alofim dinare zahav mibeis aviha chutz mishal chamiyah. Wow, that is a million dinar. It's 1,000 thousands. That's a lot of cash. That's a very, very big ksuba. We don't touch this stuff nowadays. Ksubas are really pretty standard fare. I've never seen, maybe have you ever seen a ksuba that's modified like this? I've never seen one. I think everyone is pretty, they follow the text of the Nachal Shiva. It's like you have to make sure you're like still, okay, fine. That's what the Gemara says. And that was Chutz Mishel Chamiyah. That had nothing, that was only her side of the family. It had nothing to do with him. It's just a tremendous amount of money. Bacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai started crying. Ve'amar, and he said as follows: Ashreichem Yisrael bizman she'osim ritzono shel makom. Happy would be the Jewish people when they follow the ratzon of Hashem, because when we do that, ein kol uma v'lashon sholatas bahem. When the Jewish people do what they're supposed to do, no nations can touch them. Not these Arabs, nobody. No one can touch them. Ubizman she'ein osim ritzono shel makom. But when the Jewish people don't do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, mosron biyad uma shvela, they will be put into the hands of a lowly nation. Not only that, says the Gemara, v'lo biyad uma shvela, not only that, ela biyad behemtan shel uma shvela. Look at this woman. From riches to rags. She's literally picking out barley, pearls of barley from amidst a field of dung and fecal matter. She's totally destitute because something happened that was wrong. So says the Gemara, how can that be? Benakdimun ben Gurion lo avad tzedakah. It's not possible. We know that he gave tzedakah, and we have a brisa that talks about his kindness. Tanya, the brisa writes, Amra lev al Nakdimon ben Gurion. They said about him, this is the father, when he would leave his house to go to the base medrash, clay milas, they would take these, like they roll out the red carpet. So here they rolled out the silk carpet. They rolled out the silk. Milas is a very fine type of material. and hayumatziin tachtav, that he should walk on it. And they would fold it, and then they would keep it, and then they would sell it, and then they'd make a profit. Of course, he was giving tzedakah. It says the Gemara, big musar. One possibility is that when he gave tzedakah, he didn't give tzedakah lishma. He did it for his own kavod. There's a big marsha here. Tzvi Sheir shared this with me. You should take a look at the marsha later. Very sharp. Anyways, one of the flaws might be that he did it for his own kavod. Some say no. He didn't do everything that he could have done. In other words, he could have given more tzedakah. Says the Gemara, this is what people say, that according to your camel are the packages of the camel. If you have the very strong camel, put on more packages. You have a very light, very weak camel, put on less. So the Gemara says that Nakdimon Ben Gurion did something wrong, either in his kavanas or in his actual giving. Tanya the Brisa writes, Amar Rebbe Lazar Reb Tzadok, I wish I never would have seen this. I wish I never would have seen that she was collecting barley seeds from among the hooves of horses in Akko. I applied the pasuk to her. If you don't know what to do, you, this beautiful woman, you should always follow the ikvei hatzon, because animals know where to graze. And then you can shepherd the gediosaich. A gedi is a small animal, and the Gemara says, "Al tikri gediosaich." Don't say the pasuk is talking about gediosaich animals. El geviosaich, your body. It was just enough to sustain her. It wasn't even about her progeny. She was completely poor. It's the panhandler of yesteryear. And that's what they would do. They would follow where the sheep would go, because by definition, the sheep are not stupid. They know where the food is. We don't think like animals. We think hopefully we think like people. So then that was what the Gemara says. She was poor. It was very unfortunate to watch. All right, let's get into some tougher Gemaras. We're about 10 lines down at the 2 dots, Samach Zayin Amar Aleph. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Shemin bar Abba, Amar Rav Yochanan. Ichnisa lo zahab. What if the dowry that she brought to the marriage was gold? I remember a couple of years ago, every third commercial was invest in gold, invest. Now you don't hear anybody talking about investing in gold anymore. So the Gemara, which it's not a new precious metal, it's an old precious metal. It's in Psukim in the Torah, it's all over the Beis Hamikdash. So what about gold? What if that's brought in? How do we look at it? Do we look at it as this precious metal or not? What are we really asking? Back to our Mishnah. Are we saying that it's like cash and we increase its value in the Kesuba by 50%? Or are we saying that it depreciates in value and therefore we should write a reduced price in the Kesuba? So that's what Rav Yochanan came to talk about. We do evaluate it. It's basically like cash. Rashi says, sorry, I should say it's kishvuyo. It's whatever its value is. We don't add half, and we don't reduce. That's what Rashi says on the 4th line. Dibur hamaschil v'harehu kishvuyo lo yosif shlish v'lo yifchos chomesh. Nothing. Everything stays the same. But this shita of Rav Yochanan is very difficult. And the Gemara says a quarter of the way down, Meisvei the Brisa writes, how can you say that about Zahav, that it stays flat in its value? That's not true. Meisvei hazahav harehu kekelim. When we talk about gold, it's no different than any other kli, and all klis depreciate. How do we know that? My lav kekelim shel kesef tepachte. Isn't this the same as silver? And silver depreciates over time. I don't know what the havamina is here, why silver and gold are qualitatively different, but the Gemara certainly assumes that in the way that they were used, maybe their silver was just so thin. I don't know, because if you have a silver kiddush cup, as long as you keep polishing it and you don't drop it on the floor too many times and don't stick it in the disposal, it's going to be fine. It doesn't fall apart. Maybe the quality was poor. I don't know.
Additional metals.
Right. I was going to say, yeah, it might be the impurities are much, much greater than our metals for sure. Well, what's the percentage of purity in metals now?
Like silver, gold?
Yeah.
10 to 100 to 1%. Yeah.
Wow.
But I think the answer to that is that you think of the chemistry of gold never tarnishes. It's very non-reactive. Silver is very easily oxidized.
But that doesn't ruin the actual item itself, does it? Like if you polish silver, are you also wiping away silver?
Yeah, sure you are, because you're wiping off the silver oxide. And you're making it.
That's what I was going to say.
Every
I
time
mean,
you wipe it off, you make it thinner and thinner. I mean, you're talking about micrometers, so it would take 10 lifetimes.
Yeah, but also I'm sure the quality of their craftsmanship was.
I just think gold historically always was viewed as a more valuable.
Even in the Psukim and Chumash, we see that Zahav is always before Kesef. We see this, but I'm just a little surprised by the presentation in the Gemara that it's not gold, it must be silver, which that's considered something that depreciates in its value significantly more than we would say gold. Okay, that's what the Gemara assumes. So it says the Gemara, maybe we would see from this brisa. What's that? That was all Torah. That was all Torah right there. Yeah, that was all Torah. That's what happens when you have a nuclear chemist in the back row. And I'm not talking about you. I mean, I love you. I just wasn't talking about future. So says the Gemara, how could Rav Yochanan be right to say that when gold is brought in, we don't reduce, we don't increase whatever the market value is? That's what we code into the Ksuba. Hare the Brisa says it's similar to Kalim. Kalim is Kesef and Kesef is reduced. Says the Gemara, lo, ki Kalim shows up. Who says that Kalim means that it's silver? It could be any type of Kli. And obviously, maybe the Brisa, at least according to Rav Yochanan, is talking about gold. Says the Gemara, im Kain, it should have said ki Keilav mi boiled, like its own Kli. If the Brisa was talking about itself, hazahav harehu kikelim, that's not right. It should be hazahav harehu kikelav, like its own brand, like its own type of metal. And that's not what the Brisa says. And then adding a huge complexity, the Gemara a third of the way down says, V'odin, furthermore, we have another problem with Rav Yochanan. The Gemara says, Tanya, we have a Brisa. There are two sections of this Brisa. In the beginning of the Brisa, we have two different statements, and then we have an arguing statement, but we don't know if the argument is on statement 1 or statement 2. Here's statement 1 of the Brisa. Zav hareu kekalim. Number 1, like we already saw, that gold is like kalim. And the second line is dinare zahav harehen kiksafim. And gold dinarim, gold coins, are considered like silver. And then Reb Shimon argues, we just don't know which line he's arguing on. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, but Makam Shnagu Shelo Lefortan, in a city where we aren't allowed to exchange these somethings, these coins or these kalim, we don't know which one yet. Shamino so v'harehen b'shavehen. So we do have an application, says Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. We do have an application where the gold would be status quo. Rashbag ahayah, but I don't know which comment Rashbag is arguing on. Is Rashbag arguing on the Tanakama's comment of Zahav hareu kekalim? The Zahav is similar to other kalim, or is it the Rashbag arguing on Dinare Zahav hareu kiksafim? We don't know which one. Yilema aseifa. If you want to say that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is arguing the line of the Brisa which says Dinare Zahav hareu kiksafim, Michlal, what does that imply about the previous sheet of the Tanakama? Then what would the Tanakama mean? The Tanakama savar afilu b'makom shenagu shelo lefortan, that even we would even say that it has the status of ksafim, even in a place where you're not even allowed to change them out. But holo nafke, you can't. That doesn't even make any sense. If you're in a place where you're not allowed to change it out, how can you say that it's like ksafim? You're not even allowed to change the gold. It's always going to be its own value. So that doesn't make sense. Elalaba resha. It must be that the Rashbag is arguing on the resha. The first line of the Brisa, which the Reb Shimon ben Gamliel must be arguing, is zahav hareu kekalim. V'hachi kamar. This is what it means. Zahav hareu kekalim. My kalim shall kesef. That's like we were assuming earlier that maybe the Tanakama meant that gold is like kalim in that. Gold is like silver, and silver depreciates. So then the Gemara says on that, Rashbag Omer nope harehu kedinar and shalzav b'makam shenagu shelo lefortan. So then the Gemara says that that's a second possibility, and that doesn't work for Rav Yochanan. So the Gemara responds halfway down, lo olam seifa. Really, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is arguing on the seifa, and the seifa again was the case of the kalim of the dinarim. Let me just find the brisa here. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. So the Brisa says, the second line of the Brisa was Dinar Zav harei and Kiksaf, and that's where he's arguing. And it's not that they never get changed out. It's that it's not the kind of coin that people like changing out. It's like a $2 bill. It's part of the currency, but it's a super annoying bill to have around. Okay, it's cool once, and then it's not cool after that. So like it's just annoying, and nobody wants to get paid with a $2 bill. Fine. So it's it's gold. But it's possible that it can become part of the exchange. And then the Gemara says, really the Tanakam and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel are arguing as follows. Mar savar kevan denafke meshab chinonla. That since this gold coin can be changed out, so then we do change the price in the ksuba because it can be like regular silver currency. We know we don't change the pricing one way or the other because it's lo nafke ela yedei adchak. This type of coin is really not really part. It really shouldn't be part of circulation. Another possibility is that really there's no machlokes at all in this brisa between the Tanna Kama and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. We're 4 lines before the wide lines. Everything is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and here's the right way to read this brisa. Gold is like kalim. Dinar zav harein kiksafin. B'medvar mamurim. When do we say this? That's b'makam shenagu lefortan. That's only true in a case that we would say that dinari zahav are like ksafim is in a place where you can actually exchange the coins. But in a community where we don't want these coins to really circulate and they restrict swapping out gold coins for silver coins, shaman osam, then we just evaluate them. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that under those circumstances, then whatever the value is of the gold, we don't add, we don't subtract, we just put it in the ksuba that exact way. First long line, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, b'makom shenagu shelo lefortan, shaman osam b'harehen b'shaveh. Now, this all works out fine and good. We came up with our answer. We had a question against Rabbi Yochanan. We found a couple of drachim that we could possibly answer up for Rabbi Yochanan in this brisa. The Gemara does still highlight that there's still one problem. If in fact it's true that when we say that gold is kikelim, and if you want to say that it doesn't mean silver, then the language of the brisa should have said kelav, that zahav is like itself, not zahav is like other things. Therefore, the Gemara says, Kasha, you're actually right. That's a very good question. And therefore, the Gemara presents a third and final answer before we move on to another part of this sugi. We're talking about small pieces of gold, like small shards of gold. We're talking about like a powdered gold. Those two things depreciate tremendously because even when you handle them, the gold glitter. You know, you see these people who do like the very fancy calligraphy. They use gold, they heat it up and they like drop it perfectly. It's very hard. Some of the more fancier Haggadahs might have that. So that's what the Gemara is saying. These things for sure depreciate. And therefore, the brisa about Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and the Tanna Kama was never an argument against Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan wasn't talking about those types of gold. He was talking about full kalim of gold, not little shards of gold, not things that will definitely depreciate when you touch them. What other things might go into a ksuba and how would we assess them? Amar Reb Yanai, for 3 lines into the wide lines. Besamim shel Antuchya harehen kiksafim. If someone were to get besamim from the city of Antuchya, that's as good as cash, and therefore we would add 50% to the ksuba when we code it into the ksuba. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmeni, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Gemalam shel Aravia. If a woman brings camels from Arabia into the ksuba, Isha Gova Parna Mehen, she'll profit from that. In other words, we kind of up the ante in the ksuba. Amar Apapi Hani Tosve Debe Machse. These Tosve, Rashi says these are smalos, these are shirts from the city of Machse. So Isha Gova Parnas Mem, they're shirts that last a long time. Whatever the brand was of the day, we have them now, long-lasting shirts. Amar Apapi Hani sake de Rudia, these types of bags that came from Rudia. The ashle de Kavachunya, ashle are ropes that came from the city of Kavachunya. Ishagova Parna Meham, these were very profitable items. And when they were brought as a dowry, the husband would add 50% to them in the ksuba. I thought that these money bags, which was kind of commonplace in the city of Mechoza, that if she brought those, they may be considered to be profitable. My time, because people would rely on them. They were kind of like, you know, like sometimes in our financial markets, there are like some stabilizing companies or some stabilizing groups of companies, technology, whatever, certain industries. So it says Gemara, everybody thought this was very reliable, but it's really not, because Kevin the Chazoy, the Shakle Lahu, that we saw that people took these money bags when Nafke, Ara Zavne, someone would use this, they would take it to buy a property. This would be the equivalent of gold bars. The gold bars are very stable. Nobody really uses them unless you're doing a massive transaction. Then you take the gold bar and then you go over to someone and you say, "Here's a gold bar. It's worth $10,000, whatever."
And then you get arrested.
I don't know. Is that a thing? I have no idea. What's wrong with gold bars? I have no idea.
To a bank and see what happens.
No, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, so you get arrested for bringing it in. They get arrested though.
Yeah. Either way, the point is, Oh, no. Well, you'd have to go to a pawn shop or whatever, a better version of a pawn shop. There's gold, yeah. Yeah, could be. Anyways, the point here is that the Gemara is dealing with an item that's kind of quasi in the middle. We're not talking about something that's land, and we're not talking about something that's purely metaltal, and we're talking about something that really could go both ways. And the Gemara says that it's unreliable. Next, we're at the new Mishnah. We're about 10 lines from the bottom of Samach Zayin Amud Aleph. If you we have a big Gemara to get through, but it's really fast, and it's pretty much all I got. It's on the next Amud. Let's get started with the new Mishnah. Hamasi as bito stam. If a woman gets married, but there's no description of a dowry, lo yivchos lami chamishim zuz, at least 50 zuz has to be put into the pot. Pasak le'achnisa aruma. If you make the psak that she gets nothing, it's not stam. You say, I want her to have 0 when she goes in. Aruma here literally means naked. We're talking about financially. That he says you're not getting any money. Lo yomar habal k'sha'achnisena lebesia. You can't, the husband can't say that he's only going to support her once they're married. If the father-in-law is a real jerk, then then the husband, once she's in Arusa, he has to support her there as well to make sure she has what she needs. One who marries off a Yisoma, that amount of money doesn't change. And if there's money in the pod, in the communal pod, and then a person should be, if they have money in pocket, so then they should treat her accordingly. Amar Abaye, like we saw on Shabbos, chamishim zuze pshite. When we talk about the chamishim zuz in our Mishnah, we're talking about the less expensive version of zuz. The unit, the currency of the dollar, the currency of the zuz was used in different ways in different times, and this is the less expensive one. How do we know this? Because of the last line of this Mishnah. In my case, what is this kiss of money? Amar Rachava arniki shel tzedakah. It's an arnak of tzedakah. It's a community pot. If you want to say it's the more expensive chamishim zuz, that can't be, because in yesh bekis kama you have 50 zuz in the other. This zuz was 8 times more valuable than the other zuz. So if you're giving 50 zuz, but it's the more expensive zuz, 50 times 8 is 400. I mean, that's some serious cash. That's double our Kesubos nowadays, $20,000. Of course, that's not what was meant. We're talking about the lesser form of this zuz. Brother and sister who are orphans and they need to get a parnasa. First, we take care of the yisoma with food. Why do we do that? Why do we give preferential treatment to her in regards to food? Because we've seen a little bit of a change here. Now there's women fundraising. It's an uncommon profile. We see it a little bit. When I lived on Fitch, this woman came and she knocked on the door. She was wearing a sheitel. She had like a massive tattoo like on the back of her neck. I don't know if she was a Baal Tshuva or if she was just putting on the firm costume to make a buck. She had a green card from Rabbi First signed at the bottom. But that was like more uncommon, certainly in that day. And we are under the assumption that that is seemingly not commonplace in the times of the Gemara. Last 2 words on the page as we turn to Samach Zayin and Beis, the Gemara says Yasam v'Yasoma. If we have orphans, brother and sister, Shabo linaseh, to get married, why is it that we marry off the girl first? It would probably be intuitive, but the Gemara gives its explanation. It's worse for a girl to be single when she's older than for a guy to be single when he's older. None of them are pleasant, but there is a distinction that the Gemara makes. Let's continue. Tanu Rabbanan Yasom Sheba Lisa. If there's an orphan who wants to get married, so first things first, we don't just find a shidduch. First, Sochrin lo bais, we have to make sure he rents a house. And Matzian lo mita, he's got to get a bed and furniture, v'chol klei tashmisha, whatever he needs. Ve'achar kach mesian lo isha. Then he gets married. But first, take care of the minimum requirements of your home. Make sure you have some basic structure in your life. Shenemar de machzor asher yachzar lo. This pasuk about the things that you lack. So what does that mean? And the word lo, zo isha. Where do we see that the word lo is isha? Lo, ezer kenegdo. So we see this play on words that lo is really a reference to marriage, at least in this context. Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught us so that if a person is poor, they're lacking something, we have a mitzvah to support them. You don't have to make them a millionaire, but you have to give them what they are lacking. Asher yechsar lo, very customized language in the psukim. What does it mean? Asher yechsar lo. This is a pasuk in Dvarim. Afilu sus lirkov alav ve'evel arus lefanav. If before he became poor, he had a horse-drawn chariot, and he had someone pulling the horse, whatever the case may be. That's where we have to get him back to. Amar about Hillel HaZaken, and they said this about Hillel. 12 lines down. Samach Zayin Amid Beis. Shalokach la'ani ben tovim. There was a poor person from a very good family. Echad, one person. Sus lirkov alav, and before he wasn't always so poor, so they gave him a horse to ride on. Ve'eber larutz lefanav, and they also in tzedakah they gave him an eved as well. Pamachas, one time when Hillel HaZaken was trying to solve this problem for a family, Hillel HaZaken himself, because the mitzvah of tzedakah is to give a person demach, to give them asher yechsar lo, and what this person was lacking was someone to hold and pull the horse. Okay, what was he supposed to do? There was no one he could find to do it, so he did it himself. That's a mitzvah of tzedakah. Last short line, Tana Rabbanan. Maise be'anshe Galil ha'elyon, in the upper Galilee, shalakhu la'ani ben tovim, a poor person from a good family, echad, mitzipori, and they gave him litra basar b'chol yom. A litra basar, this is approximately a pound of meat every day. Says the Gemara, litra basar my revusa. No. And if you go to a homeless shelter, you can get a pound of meat. It's not like it may not be steak, but it's you'll be able to get enough protein. So Amar Rav Huna, no, hold on one second. Litra basar mishal ofos. We're talking about a litra of meat from chickens. Nowadays, things are a little reversed. By us, chicken is $9 a pound, and steaks are $20 a pound. Things are a little bit reversed, but it was more of a delicacy, I guess it seems. By same of a litra basar mamish. No, the litra, the 1 pound, was coins. And then they would take the coins and go buy meat with that, which was a massive amount of meat. That wasn't a pound of meat, it was a pound of coins. Rav Ashi Amar, no, Hasam Kvar Katan Haya was a very small community. B'chol Yoma have a mifsadei chiyusa tulte. What would happen is they would shecht one animal for him to get his litra of basar, but they couldn't even sell the rest of it. They couldn't have nothing. It was just they wasted the rest of the animal. There was a person who came in front of Reb Nechemia. What do you normally eat? You normally eat fatty meats and old wines. It's the diet of the wealthy. Do you want to join me? I'm a little bit of a pauper. I don't have fancy food, but I have lentil soup. So Gil Gelimo Ba'adashim V'meis. It's a terrible story. He had him over for dinner and then he croaked. He died from eating the lentils. Omar, oy lo lazeh shahargo Nechemia. Oh, terrible for this guy who Nechemia killed. Says the Gemara, Adarabba, oy lo Nechemia shahargo lazeh. I feel terrible for Nechemia, that Nechemia is still alive, yet he killed someone. That's what it should have said, me boy. That would have been a better language. Elaihu, who delo iboile lifnuke nafshe kulehai. No, this guy who lived his whole life with basar shamein and yain yashan. That's you're living. It's gvir culture, it's you're living in the lap of luxury and you're only eating foods of the highest echelons. That's not right. That's not right. A person should have a balance and they should be eating regular foods too. Fine. Hodasa lakame de Rava, 4 lines before the very wide lines. Person came in front of Rava. Amar lo b'ma'ata soid. What are you eating? What do you typically eat? Amar lo b'tarnagolas petuma v'yayin yashan. That's a fattened bird and old wine. Amar le v'lo chayashta ladochka de tzibura. You're a drain on society. Well, what's going to happen when you're poor? They have to get you back to asher yechsar lo. So you every day you have a small what are those like small chickens called? Can't remember right now. Cornish hens. Good. So then you're such an expensive guy, and it's not right. You think I'm eating food from the tzibur? No, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is taking care of me. We have in the Brisa, Eine kol elecha yisaberu, ve'atano sein lahem esochlam be'ito. Be'itam lo ne'emar, ela be'ito. The pasuk says, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of everyone who looks at him, and you give them lechem be'ito. Melamed shekol echad ve'echad nosen HaKadosh Baruch Hu parnasaso be'ito. So you think that it's the tzibur. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is pulling the string. So that's ridiculous. Adahachi. While this conversation was happening, Asoy achte de Rava, Rava's sister walked in, and says the Gemara, Delo chazyala tleisar shnei. 13 years had transpired since the last time that they saw each other. Very, very long break. And what did she bring him? Hashgacha pratis deoraisa. What did she bring him? Exactly what Rava criticized the guy about. Omar, my dekama, what is going on here? This is incredible. I'm having a conversation with this guy. I'm telling him he's living in the lap of luxury. My sister walks in with the same exact foods and hands them to me. Omar le na nesi lach. I answered you. Literally, what it means is I answered you. But what the Gemara means is I spoke too fast. I'm not correct. Kumechol, you can go eat your expensive chicken and your old wine, no problem at all. And he read this as hashgacha pratis. Tanu Rabbanan, second of the very wide lines. The rabbis teach us, ein lo, if a person doesn't have anything, but ve'eino rotze lihis parnes, but he also doesn't want to take any handouts. There are people like that. It's a lot of pride. What he's supposed to do. It's not a simple scenario. Nosn lo l'shum halva. We give him something as though it's a loan, and then v'chozrin v'nosn lo l'shum matana d'Rabbi Meir. No, just to be a mensch. No, it's a loan. It's a loan. No, it's a loan. And you know what? Like 6 months later, you're like, it's okay, I'm a vater. And by that point, you've already fed their whole family. That's Divrei Rabbi Meir. The rabbis say, no. Nosn lo l'shum matana. First, you give it to them as a matana. V'chozrin v'nosn lo l'shum halva. Says the Gemara, giving it to them as a matana. That's what they didn't want. They didn't want a handout. The shum matana halo shokil. He won't take it if you're giving out a matana. The case was ein lo ve'ein rotze lihis parnes. So of course he's not going to take a matana. The Gemara says you're right, but really what he mean, what the Chachamim mean is Amar Rava liftoach lo l'shum matana. The first thing you say to them is, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you. Don't worry, I got it. Let me just get you dinner." And then he'll say, "No handouts." Okay, fine. Then let me just give you a loan. You'll pay me back next year. No problem. But that's what the Chachamim are adding is that we should start by offering a matana. What about yeshlo ve'eno rotze lihis parnes? 4 lines into the wide lines. He has money and he still doesn't want to do anything with the community. Nosn lo l'shum matana. So then he nosn lo l'shum matana. He won't use his own money. So then we still give him a gift. V'chozrim v'nifraim himenu. The Gemara says chozrim v'nifraim himenu. I don't understand. Sulo shakil. This ruse only works once. Amar of Papa la'achar misa. We'll be able to collect from him after he dies. So we will take care of him. He doesn't want to use his own money. He's starving himself. He's got money in the bank. I won't be using my money, and I'm not taking from you. It's like a suicide pact. So we give him, and then we collect from his yorshim after he dies. Reb Shimon Omer, yesh lo ve'ein rotze lihis parnes, ein niskakin lo. That's his problem. Ein lo ve'ein rotze lihis parnes. That if a person doesn't have and they don't want to take, like the case we saw earlier. Omrim lo have mashkon v'tol. Leave us with something and then take food. They should tazuach dai to Allah in order to make him feel more calm. You've got a Rolex, great. Leave your Rolex over here. Take whatever you need. Your Rolex is $10,000. Take as much food as you want over the course of the year. No problem at all. Tanu Rabbanan, a drush on the pasuk of Ha'avei Ta'avitenu. Let's learn the whole pasuk. The pasuk says, "Kifasoach tiftach es yadecha lo." A person should surely open up their hands to him. V'ha'avei ta'avitenu de machzoro asher yachzor lo. And make sure to give him havei ta'avitenu, hard words to translate. We're going to be working on that now. So, what does each word mean? So the Gemara says 2/3 of the way down, another 10 lines, and then we'll stop. Tanu Rabbanan ha'aveit. That was the case we saw above. A person who has no money, but their pride gets in the way. They don't want to take anything. Like we saw, give it to him as a halva, and then change your mind later to make it into a matana. What does ta'avitenu means? That's a person who has money, but he's not using his own money. What's he going to do? Like we saw earlier. He's not our obligation. What does that word mean? The double language. You know what? Just because of time, we're going to stop right here at Lashon Bnei Adam. That the reason why the pasuk says Tabitenu twice is not meant to make a drasha. And tomorrow we'll start with Mar Ukva, about 15 lines or so from the bottom. I'll be recording and posting tomorrow. No shiur tomorrow night in person. Wishing you all a beautiful night.